A poor nanny left a birthday card. The lonely CEO read it and changed her life forever. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The rain had stopped, but the city still gleamed with reflections of neon signs and headlights. Inside the 37th floor of Hale Tower, Alexander Hale sat alone in an office too beautiful to feel alive. The clock read 11:47 p.m. A half-finished whiskey glowed amber beside the untouched slice of chocolate cake his assistant had left earlier that evening. It was his birthday. No calls, no visits, just silence, and the faint hum of the city below. His reflection in the glass wall looked like that of a stranger, successful, powerful, and utterly empty. He told himself birthdays didn't matter, that work was enough. But the truth was simpler. He had forgotten what warmth felt like. He sighed, ready to leave, when his eyes landed on something out of place on his desk. A small white envelope, slightly bent at the corner, sealed with a sticker of a red balloon. The handwriting was uneven, the kind that tried to look neat but couldn't hide its honesty. In small blue letters it read, "To Mr. Hale." He frowned. No one in his office would dare leave a personal note. He opened it carefully. Inside was a handmade cardstock folded in half, decorated with crayons and a child's drawing. A stick figure of a tall man in a suit holding hands with a smaller girl and a woman with a ponytail. Above them, in shaky letters, "Happy birthday, Mr. Hale. Thank you for being kind to Sophie." There was no logo, no signature except for one small name written in pencil at the corner: Maya, the nanny. For a long moment, Alexander didn't move. The office lights hummed, but all he could hear was the faint scratch of his breath. He remembered Sophie, his late brother's daughter, giggling in the garden weeks ago. Maya had been the only one who could make her laugh that way. He had noticed, vaguely, how the house felt less empty when she was there. Now she was gone, fired by his housekeeper, apparently, for giving an inappropriate personal gift. His fingers brushed the card again. The paper was cheap, soft at the fold, a small corner smudged by what might have been crayon dust or a tear. He didn't know why, but his chest ached. Thank you for being kind to Sophie. He hadn't realized anyone saw that side of him. He closed the card slowly, set it back on the desk, and stared at the city lights beyond the window. For the first time in years, the room felt unbearably quiet. The kind of quiet that asked questions he didn't want to answer. What would it feel like to be remembered for something other than power? He exhaled a shaky sound. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted, something small, fragile, human. He didn't know it yet, but that little birthday card, left by a poor nanny who thought no one would notice, was about to change everything. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the glass walls of Hale Tower, turning the city into gold and silver. Alexander Hale sat behind his desk, staring at the same small birthday card. The edges had curled slightly overnight. He could not explain why he had taken it home, but there it was on the marble counter beside his untouched breakfast. Every time he looked at it, his chest tightened. "Happy birthday, Mr. Hale. Thank you for being kind to Sophie." The words echoed in his mind like a song he did not remember learning. He picked up his phone and called the housekeeper. "Where is the nanny, Maya?" he asked. The woman hesitated. "She was let go, sir. Yesterday. She left quietly. I believe she moved out of her apartment this morning." He hung up, his pulse beating hard. Alexander Hale had built an empire on logic and precision. Feelings were inefficient. But now, logic could not silence the image of a young woman leaving a simple card behind. That afternoon, while his driver waited at the curb, he found himself scrolling through the internal database, looking for her employment record. Her address was listed as a small complex in Queens. He told himself it was just curiosity, professional concern, but when the car stopped at the worn brick building, something in him already knew it was more than that. The hallway smelled faintly of detergent and coffee. The landlord, an older man in a flannel shirt, looked surprised to see him. "Maya Santos?" She moved out, couldn't pay rent, left before dawn. Sweet girl, always polite. Alexander thanked him quietly and turned back toward the street. For a moment, he just stood there, the winter air biting at his throat. It had been years since anyone had made him feel powerless. He had all the money in the world, yet he could not stop thinking about a woman who had nothing but sincerity. That night he sat in his penthouse, city lights flickering like distant stars. He poured himself another glass of whiskey but did not drink it. The card lay on the coffee table beside his laptop. He reached for it again, tracing the small drawing Sophie had made. The little stick figure girl, smiling between two tall adults. His late brother's daughter. The niece he had promised to protect but had kept at arm's length out of fear of failing her. He had watched her laughter fade after her parents died, had told himself that silence was better than saying the wrong thing. But Maya had changed that. He remembered how Sophie had started humming again when the nanny was around, how the house had felt warmer somehow, even when he stayed late at the office. Maybe that was what kindness did, it stayed, even after the person left. He closed his eyes, trying to forget the image of Maya's tired face on the night she brought Sophie hot cocoa in the living room, her hands trembling slightly as she balanced the tray. She had smiled when Sophie spilled some on her sleeve and said softly, "It is just cocoa, it washes off." Something about the memory made his throat tighten. The next morning he instructed his assistant, Claire, to find Maya. Check every staffing agency. Nursing homes, community centers, anywhere she might have gone. Claire blinked. "Sir, may I ask why?" Alexander paused, eyes on the skyline. "Because she deserves better than a dismissal notice. And because I owe her something." It was the first time in years he had admitted owing anyone anything. Hours later, as he sat through a board meeting, his mind drifted. The presentation slides blurred into meaningless numbers. For the first time, he wondered what Maya was doing at that exact moment. Was she still in the city? Was she safe? He imagined her walking through cold streets with that same quiet dignity, unaware that somewhere above the skyline, a man who had everything was trying to find her. The card was still in his coat pocket. Every time he touched it, he felt less like a CEO and more like a man who had finally remembered how to feel. 2 days later, Alexander's assistant Claire walked into his office holding a printed note. "Sir, I found her," she said. He looked up from his desk, the faintest flicker of hope flashing through his usually unreadable eyes. "Where?" he asked. "She is working at Westbridge Care Center, a private nursing home in Brooklyn. It seems she took a night job there last week." He nodded once, grabbed his coat, and left before she could ask anything more. The winter wind cut through the city, sharp and cold. By the time he arrived, dusk had already fallen, the sky the color of steel. The facility was small but clean, the kind of place that smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. He found her in the hallway, pushing a cart of towels and medical supplies, her hair tied back, her uniform slightly too large for her frame. For a moment, he just stood there, watching her. Maya looked exhausted, dark circles beneath her eyes. But when an elderly patient waved at her, she smiled the same gentle smile that had once filled his home with warmth. She did not see him at first. When she turned and nearly collided with him, the tray in her hands trembled. "Mr. Hale?" she breathed, stunned. "What are you doing here?" He noticed how she instinctively stepped back, as if ready to apologize for existing. "I came to see you," he said quietly. "To return something." He pulled the small birthday card from his coat pocket and held it out. Her eyes widened. "You kept it?" He nodded. "I read it. More than once." She looked away, embarrassed. "It was just a card, sir. Sophie wanted to draw something for you. I only helped her write the words. It was more than a card, Maya," he said softly. "It reminded me that kindness still exists in a place I thought was hollow." She hesitated, clearly unsure what to say. A nurse called her name from down the hall, and she turned briefly, answering before facing him again. "You should not have come here, Mr. Hale. This is my job now. I am fine." He studied her for a long moment. "You are not fine," he said quietly. "You are working 2 shifts and sleeping barely at all. You fainted last week, did you not?" Her lips parted in surprise. "Who told you that?" Claire found out. "You could have asked for help." "I do not want help," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "People like me do not get second chances. We just keep moving." There was no bitterness in her tone, only tired truth. Something inside him ached at her words. He had spent years surrounded by wealth, yet none of it had ever sounded as honest as what she had just said. "Maya," he said quietly, "you changed that house. You changed Sophie. You even changed me." She shook her head, her eyes glossy. "Please do not say that. I did nothing special." "You reminded me what it feels like to care," he replied. I cannot let you vanish into the city like you never existed." Her hands tightened around the cart handle. "Then what do you want from me?" He paused, the truth sitting heavy in his throat. "To help. To make things right." She gave a small, weary laugh. "Rich people always think they can fix things with money." "Not this time," he said quietly. "This is not about money." For a long moment neither spoke. The hum of medical machines and the faint creak of a wheelchair filled the silence. Finally she whispered, "You should go, Mr. Hale. You do not belong here." He looked at her one last time, then nodded. "Maybe not, but I will not stop until you have what you deserve." When he left, she stood still, staring at the card in her hand. The crayon marks glowed under the fluorescent lights, like something fragile but alive. Outside, Alexander stepped into the cold night, the wind biting at his face. But for the first time in years, he felt more awake than ever. He knew exactly what he needed to do next. The following morning, Alexander Hale arrived at his office before dawn. The city below was still dark, the streets wet from an overnight drizzle. He could not stop thinking about Maya's words. "People like me do not get second chances." They echoed in his head as he stared at his reflection in the glass wall. He had spent a lifetime creating opportunities for others' businesses, contracts, mergers, but had never stopped to consider the human faces behind those numbers. For the first time, he realized how hollow that success felt. By 8 o'clock, his assistant Claire walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Sir, the board meeting starts in 30 minutes, she said. "Cancel it," he replied without looking up. Claire froze. "Excuse me? Cancel everything today. I have something more important to do." She had worked with him long enough to know better than to argue. A few hours later, Alexander stepped out of his car in front of the Westbridge Care Center again, this time carrying a sealed envelope and a warm coat over his arm. Inside, the hallways buzzed quietly with nurses and soft chatter. He found Maya in the break room, sitting at a corner table with a paper cup of coffee that had long gone cold. She looked startled when she saw him. "Mr. Hale, I told you. I know what you told me," he interrupted gently. "But I need you to hear me out." He set the envelope on the table between them. "What is this?" she asked cautiously. "Your reinstatement letter," he said, "and a contract offer from Hale Foundation. You would not be a nanny. You would be leading our new outreach program for children's mental health. It is a full-time position with benefits, housing, and education support." Maya blinked, stunned. "I do not understand." "Why me?" He smiled faintly. "Because you remind people how to be human, Maya. You did it for Sophie. You did it for me." Her eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. "I cannot accept this. It feels like charity." "It is not charity," he said softly. "It is recognition. You deserve it." She hesitated, her hand trembling slightly as she touched the envelope. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Alexander paused, his voice lower now. "Because when I read that card, something inside me changed. I saw a world where kindness still mattered, and I realized I had been living like it did not." Maya lowered her gaze, trying to hold back emotion. "Mr. Hale, I do not know what to say." "Say yes," he said simply. "Say you will give yourself a chance." A faint smile broke through her uncertainty. "I will think about it." He nodded, respecting the hesitation. "That is all I ask." Before he left, he draped the coat over the back of her chair. "It looks cold out there," he said quietly. "Keep it." She glanced at it, touched the fabric gently, and whispered, "Thank you." As he walked down the hallway, an elderly woman in a wheelchair smiled up at him. "She is a good one, that girl," the woman said kindly. "The best," he replied without thinking. Outside, snow had started to fall again, soft and slow. He stood under the awning for a long time, watching the flakes disappear against the city pavement. For the first time in years, Alexander Hale felt something close to peace. He had spent years chasing power, but now he was chasing purpose. Later that night, he returned to his penthouse and looked around the quiet rooms. The emptiness no longer frightened him. On his desk sat the same birthday card, now framed in glass. He picked it up and smiled faintly. "Happy birthday, Mr. Hale," he murmured. "You finally got your wish." In the distance, the city lights shimmered through the falling snow, and for the first time, he knew that tomorrow would not be another lonely day. Over the next few weeks, winter deepened, and so did the quiet change inside Alexander Hale. Each morning he arrived at Hale Tower earlier than usual, not to sign contracts but to meet with the team from the foundation he had just revived. For the first time, his board members saw him smile during meetings. The initiative he had named the Second Chance Project focused on helping low-income families find childcare and education support. When asked why he cared, he simply said, "Because someone reminded me what kindness can do." Meanwhile, Maya kept working her night shifts at the nursing home. She had not accepted the offer yet, though the envelope stayed in her locker, edges worn from being handled so many times. Every night she told herself she was not ready, that people like her did not belong in the world of men like him. Still, she could not forget the look in his eyes when he said, "You deserve it." It haunted her in the gentlest way. One late evening, as she helped an elderly man back to bed, she suddenly felt dizzy. The room spun. She barely had time to grab the rail before darkness swept over her. When she opened her eyes again, the sterile ceiling lights above told her she was in a hospital room. Her pulse quickened when she saw him sitting by her side. Alexander. His suit jacket was folded neatly on the chair, his sleeves rolled up, his expression soft but heavy with concern. "You scared me," he said quietly. "You collapsed from exhaustion. The doctor said you have been overworking yourself." She blinked, trying to sit up, but he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Do not move. Just rest." "You should not be here," she whispered. "You have meetings, responsibilities." "This is where I need to be," he interrupted gently. His tone left no room for argument. For a moment neither spoke. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor filled the silence between them. Then he said, almost to himself, "You know, I used to think that power was measured by control, but now I realize it is measured by care." Maya looked at him, uncertain. "You do not owe me anything, Mr. Hale." He smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but maybe I owe myself the chance to be someone better." A soft knock interrupted them. Sophie peeked into the room, holding a small paper bag and a worried expression. "Uncle Alex, is Miss Maya going to be okay?" Maya's heart softened at the little girl's voice. "I am fine, sweetheart," she said gently. Sophie climbed onto the chair and handed her the bag. "I drew something for you." Inside was a crayon drawing 3 stick figures again. But this time, they were standing in front of a hospital bed with bright yellow suns drawn all around them. Above it, in wobbly letters, Sophie had written, "Feel better soon." Maya's throat tightened. She smiled and hugged the little girl. Alexander watched quietly, something unspoken flickering in his eyes. "She insisted on coming," he said softly. "She missed you." Maya glanced at him, tears threatening to spill. "You did not have to bring her." "I wanted to," he replied. "You are family to her, whether you realize it or not." The words hung between them, fragile and powerful. That night, long after Sophie had fallen asleep in the corner chair, Alexander remained in the room. He watched the steady rhythm of Maya's breathing and the faint rise and fall of her chest. For the first time in years, he prayed not for success, but for someone else's strength. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the same framed birthday card, the one that had started it all. Setting it on the bedside table, he whispered, "You gave me a reason to care again. Now let me return the favor." Outside, snow fell softly against the window, blanketing the city in quiet grace. For Alexander Hale, it no longer felt like winter. It felt like the beginning of something worth keeping. 3 days passed before Maya was well enough to leave the hospital. The color had returned to her cheeks, but her steps were still slow and careful. Alexander was waiting for her by the main entrance, wearing his usual charcoal coat, though the hard edges of his expression were gone. "Are you sure you are ready?" he asked as she approached. The doctor said rest for at least another week. She smiled faintly. "If I stay here any longer, they will start charging me rent." He chuckled, the sound quiet but genuine. "Then let me at least give you a ride home." She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. The car ride was calm, the silence between them not heavy, just thoughtful. Outside, the city was waking up, sunlight bouncing off wet streets. "I went to the care center," he said suddenly. "They told me you resigned." She looked out the window, watching people hurry past with their coffee cups. "I did. They needed someone who could handle double shifts, and I cannot anymore." "Then take the offer from the foundation," he said softly. "We need someone who understands people, not just numbers." She glanced at him, her eyes uncertain. "Do you really think I can do that job?" "I know you can," he replied simply. When they reached her small apartment building, he got out first, opening the door for her. She paused on the sidewalk, looking up at the cracked bricks and the flickering hallway light inside. "This is home," she said quietly. For now, he answered, his tone gentle. But it does not have to stay that way. She gave him a small smile. You sound like someone who believes in happy endings. I did not, he said, until I met you. The words lingered between them, delicate but real. She looked away, her heart racing. Thank you for everything, Mr. Hale. He nodded once. Call me Alexander. With that, he turned to leave, his footsteps fading down the street. Maya stood there for a long moment, her hand resting on the strap of her bag. When she finally went upstairs, she found an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a simple note. The world needs more people like you. See you Monday. A.H. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were the good kind. On Monday morning, she walked into the Hale Foundation headquarters, her hair neatly tied back, her heart thudding with a mix of fear and hope. Claire greeted her warmly, guiding her to a small office with a window view. Welcome to the team, Miss Santos, she said with a smile. Mr. Hale said to make sure you have everything you need. Maya looked around the room, a desk, a laptop, and a framed photo of the first outreach group the foundation had ever helped. Her fingers brushed the edge of the frame as she whispered, "Thank you." Later that week, during the first community event, Maya watched children paint at long tables while parents laughed nearby. The sound filled the hall with life. She turned and saw Alexander standing near the back, arms folded, a quiet smile on his face. When their eyes met, he gave a small nod as if to say, "You did this." The moment felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. That evening, as the event ended, Maya found him cleaning up stray crayons from the floor. "You do not have to do that," she said, laughing softly. "I do not mind," he replied. "It feels good to build something that matters." She studied him, noticing the gentleness that had replaced the cold precision he once carried. "You have changed," she said quietly. "Maybe," he replied. "Or maybe I just remembered who I was supposed to be." She smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "You are impossible to argue with." "I will take that as a compliment," he said, grinning slightly. Outside, the city glowed with the golden light of evening. As they stood by the window, watching the last children leave with their families, Maya whispered, "You gave me a second chance." Alexander looked at her and said softly, "No, you gave it to me first." The quiet between them felt like home. Weeks turned into months, and the Hale Foundation bloomed into something alive and full of heart. Under Maya's guidance, new programs opened in neighborhoods that had once been forgotten. The news called it a miracle of management, but Alexander knew it was more than that. It was Maya's quiet determination, her belief that even the smallest kindness could rebuild a life. Every Friday, she would visit the Children's Center personally, helping with art classes and tutoring sessions. Sometimes Alexander went along, standing in the back, watching as she knelt beside a little boy struggling to write his name. Her voice was patient and soft, her smile the same one that had changed his life. One afternoon, as she packed supplies after a long day, he appeared at the doorway, sleeves rolled up, a hint of exhaustion in his own eyes. "You missed lunch again," he said, holding out a paper bag. "Grilled cheese and soup. Claire told me it is your favorite." She laughed, taking the bag. "You really should not be doing that, Mr. Hale." "Alexander," he corrected gently, "you promised." She smiled. "Fine. Thank you, Alexander." As she ate, he leaned against the doorframe, watching her with quiet admiration. "You make this place feel different," he said. "Before, it was just an organization. Now it feels human." She met his gaze, the warmth in his tone making her chest tighten. "I think it was always in you," she said softly. "You just needed a reason." That night, after everyone left, they walked together to the parking lot. The air was cool, the sky painted with faint stars. When they reached his car, she turned to him. "Why are you doing all of this?" she asked. "The foundation, the projects, everything. It cannot just be about me." He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "It is about making amends with the world, with myself, and maybe with my brother. I spent years building walls around my heart. You tore them down without even trying." Her breath caught, but she shook her head gently. "Do not give me that credit. I just left a card." "A card that changed everything," he said. "Maya, I see the world differently now. I see people differently." She looked away, feeling her pulse quicken. "Alexander, please. You are kind, but we live in different worlds. Maybe, he said, stepping closer, but I am tired of pretending that it matters. The wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of city traffic. Her eyes met his, full of confusion and unspoken longing. For a moment, neither moved. Then she whispered, "If I believe you, everything changes." "Then let it," he said softly. "Let it change." The moment was broken by the buzz of her phone. She glanced down, reading the message that had just come in news from the hospital. One of the children from their program, a little girl named Emma, had collapsed during a class and was in critical condition. Without hesitation, Maya said, "We need to go." Alexander's expression shifted instantly. "Get in," he said. Within minutes, they were speeding through the city toward Westbridge Hospital. The drive was silent except for the sound of tires slicing through puddles. When they arrived, Maya rushed inside, her heart pounding. Emma lay in a small hospital bed, pale but breathing. The doctor explained that her condition was stable now, thanks to the immediate help of the foundation's staff. Maya's shoulders relaxed, tears of relief filling her eyes. Alexander stood beside her, his hand gently touching her back. "She will be okay," he murmured. Maya nodded, her voice trembling. "I could not have handled losing her." "You will not," he said firmly, "because you are not alone anymore." For the first time, she believed him. In that sterile hospital corridor, surrounded by beeping monitors and fading echoes, Maya realized something profound. She had spent her life caring for others, but now someone cared for her too. She turned to him, whispering, "You really have changed." He smiled, his voice low. "So have you." The night stretched quiet around them, but inside, something new had begun a bond neither of them could deny. The next morning, sunlight streamed softly through the tall hospital windows. Emma was awake, sitting up in bed, clutching a small teddy bear that Maya had brought her. Her color had returned, and her laughter filled the quiet room. Maya sat beside her, brushing the child's hair back gently. Alexander stood near the doorway, his hands in his pockets, watching the scene with quiet admiration. When Emma noticed him, she grinned. "Mr. Hale, did you bring me pancakes?" He smiled. "I brought something better," he said, handing her a small book filled with blank pages and colorful markers. "You can draw your dreams here. When it's full, you bring it to my office, and I'll hang it in our foundation's gallery." Emma gasped. "You have a gallery?" "We do now," he replied softly, glancing at Maya. She smiled, her eyes shining. Later that day, when Emma's mother arrived to take her home, Maya and Alexander stepped outside into the hospital courtyard. The air was crisp, the first hints of spring replacing the long winter chill. Birds darted between the bare branches above them, their songs soft but full of life. "You handled everything perfectly," he said. "I did not," she replied modestly. "The staff did." "They did because you inspired them," he said simply. She laughed lightly. "You always make things sound bigger than they are." "No," he said, his tone turning more serious. "You make things matter." For a moment, silence settled between them. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "What is that?" she asked. "An invitation," he said. "The Foundation's first annual charity gala is tomorrow night. It is our chance to thank everyone who helped make this possible." She hesitated. "I do not belong at events like that, Alexander." "You belong more than anyone," he said. "You built the heart of this foundation. Please, come." The next evening, the grand ballroom of the Hale Tower shimmered with golden light. Guests in elegant suits and gowns filled the room, laughter mingling with the soft notes of a live orchestra. Maya stood near the entrance, feeling both out of place and overwhelmed. She wore a simple navy dress, borrowed from Claire, her hair loosely curled. When Alexander saw her walk in, he froze for a moment, the crowd fading around him. He approached, offering his hand with a warm smile. "You came," he said quietly. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "But Sophie told me heroes should not hide." He chuckled softly. "Wise girl." Throughout the evening, Alexander introduced her to donors and partners, always making sure to credit her for the foundation's success. "It was Maya's compassion that built this," he said proudly. "All I did was follow her lead." Maya's face flushed with emotion. As the evening went on, the host called for attention. Alexander stepped up to the microphone. The crowd fell silent. "A year ago," he began, "I received a simple birthday card. It had a child's drawing and a few words that changed my life. That card reminded me that kindness is not weakness, it is power. It is the reason we are all here tonight." He looked directly at Maya as he spoke. "That card came from a woman who believed in hope when I had forgotten what it looked like. Tonight, I want to thank her, and I want to dedicate this foundation's future to people like her." The room erupted in applause. Maya stood frozen, tears filling her eyes. When Alexander stepped down from the stage, she met him at the edge of the crowd. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "Yes, I did," he said softly. "You gave me everything worth having." The orchestra began to play again, slow and steady. Alexander extended his hand. "Dance with me?" For a heartbeat, she hesitated, then took his hand. As they moved together beneath the soft golden lights, she looked up at him and whispered, "You really did change, Alexander." He smiled down at her. "No, Maya, you changed me." Around them, the room glowed, full of laughter and warmth, and for the first time in either of their lives, everything felt exactly where it was meant to be. The gala ended long after midnight, but the memory of it lingered like a soft echo in Maya's heart. When the final guests left, the music faded into the quiet hum of the city beyond the glass walls. Alexander walked her to the terrace, where the lights of Manhattan shimmered below like a field of stars. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain. "You did not tell me there would be a speech," she said softly, her cheeks still warm. "If I had, you might not have come," he replied with a smile. "I wanted you to hear it exactly as I meant it." She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "You said that card changed your life." He nodded slowly. "It did, but not because of the words, because of the person behind them." She took a deep breath, feeling her chest tighten. "I never thought anyone like you could feel that way about someone like me." "Someone like you?" he repeated, stepping closer. "Maya, you are the reason I remember what it means to be alive. You taught me that love is not built on status. It is built on sincerity." Her eyes glistened, catching the soft light from the city. "Alexander." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "You once gave me a card," he said quietly. "Tonight, I want to give you something in return." Her breath caught as he opened it. Inside was a delicate silver pendant shaped like a small envelope, engraved with the words, "Thank you for being kind." He smiled gently. "It is not a ring," he said. "Not yet, but it is a promise. A promise that I will never forget what you taught me." She laughed softly through her tears. "You do not need to promise me anything. You have already done more than I ever dreamed." He shook his head. "No, Maya, this is just the beginning." He fastened the pendant around her neck, his hands brushing her skin lightly. For a moment, the world went still. She looked up at him, her voice trembling. "So what happens now?" "Now," he said, "we build something new. Together." Months passed, and spring unfolded across the city. The Hale Foundation grew faster than anyone expected. New centers opened, and children filled them with laughter and hope. Maya became the face of the organization's compassion, while Alexander became its quiet strength. They worked side by side, not as CEO and employee, but as partners with the same dream to make kindness powerful again. On the anniversary of the foundation's first gala, they held a small ceremony at the new community wing. Sophie cut the ribbon, her smile wide and proud. "Uncle Alex says this place is for everyone who needs a little hope," she told the crowd. Alexander placed his hand gently on Maya's shoulder. "And she is the one who showed me how to find it," he added. That evening, after everyone left, Maya stood alone in the gallery. On the main wall hung a framed piece of the original birthday card. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "The kindness that started everything." She felt tears rise as she touched the glass. A familiar voice came from behind her. "Still looking at that old thing?" She turned to see Alexander leaning in the doorway, a soft smile on his face. "It reminds me where we began," she said. "And it reminds me where we are now," he answered. He walked toward her, taking her hand. The lights dimmed, leaving only the soft glow from the city beyond the windows. "Maya," he said, his voice low and steady, "I think it is time I ask you something I should have asked a long time ago." She looked up at him, her heart racing. "What is it?" He smiled, the kind of smile that carried every piece of his journey, the loneliness, the healing, the love. "Will you marry me?" Her eyes filled with tears, but her answer was clear, whispered through a trembling laugh. "Yes, Alexander. 1,000 times yes." He pulled her close, the city lights painting them in gold. The pendant at her neck glimmered like a star between them. Somewhere far below, the world kept moving, but for that one perfect moment, Everything stopped. And just like that, the poor nanny who left a birthday card and the lonely CEO who read it found not just redemption but home.